2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's Rock Art, a series dedicated to the art and the artists that made rock fandom a feast for the eyes to complement what was going on with our ears. The undisputed titan among the graphic artists and designers who created album covers back in the heyday of album art was the design agency Hipgnosis. So it seemed only logical that we should start the series with them being Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell. Because their work as an agency spanned approximately 16 years, from 1967 to 1983 or 84, produced over 200 album covers, dozens of which have become iconic, we decided to spend several episodes looking at various aspects of their career. Our first episode reviewed the symbiotic relationship between Hipgnosis and the prog rock pioneers Pink Floyd. Steve, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it is interesting that the members of Pink Floyd and those who made up the Hipgnosis collective were well acquainted. Even those connections go back to childhood. And that really starting with the Floyd's second album, Hipgnosis and Floyd worked together for well over a decade and create.
Right, their second album, A Saucer Full of Secrets, was Hipgnosis's first.
That's right.
Commission, right? So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so as Hipgnosis grew, as did Pink Floyd, I think the high watermark, perhaps for both, was the Dark Side of the Moon LP in the early 70s. But there's no question that when you think of Hipgnosis, you think of Floyd, and when you think of Floyd, you think of Hipgnosis. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, they were schoolmates, they were rugby teammates, right, roommates at various points. Yeah. In fact, Syd Barrett writing Hipgnosis on the bathroom of one of the apartments that they shared was the inspiration for their naming their agency, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that association, even after Hipgnosis as an agency was over, that went on. It continues to the present. Basically, Aubrey Powell is still working with Pink Floyd.
That's right.
So there's that. Our second episode, we talked about the work that Hipgnosis did for artists that relied on them extensively or even exclusively for their album art. That included such artists as Genesis and Peter Gabriel, Paul McCartney and Wings, Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, Al Stewart, 10cc, the Hollies, and the Alan Parsons Project. So a lot of iconic album covers coming from those associations.
That's right.
And our last episode was dedicated to the one-shots, groups and artists who, for whatever reason, only commissioned album art from Hipgnosis once. A lot of debut artists among them. And in this episode, we'll be wrapping up our look at Hipgnosis with a focus on a handful of iconic album covers that weren't suited for the previous episodes, as well as what we broadly call objectionable covers. And we're going to start with the objectionable albums, but first we should probably say something about the criteria that we used to select the albums in this selection. Clearly, there's no completely objective definition of what is objectionable and what is not.
Right. That's right. To some degree, it's the old Supreme Court line. I know pornography when I see it. There is something that you have a reaction, maybe a visceral reaction to something, and it is, of course, in the end,
or a prurient interest, to use some other.
There we go. Oh, that's it. Yeah, as we go down the SCOTUS trail. But it is the case that Hipgnosis went to and maybe over the line in several cases. And what's sort of interesting about these covers is not just what's on the cover, but then sort of if you think about sort of the choices that were made. What was the intent? What impression were the artists trying to make on the marketplace? This kind of thing. It oftentimes these covers will, I think, raise as many questions as they, answer. And so it certainly goes beyond just, objectionable content. It's what makes
Right. I mean, none of the covers that we're going to be looking at is obscene or pornographic. So it's nothing as clear cut as that.
That's right.
There's a fine line between, for instance, humor and bad taste,
Yeah.
between artistic nudity and exploitation, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera.
Yeah.
So, there's always been the spectrum between people who have a very liberal idea. Sex is fun and can be funny, and let's not kill everything by being so serious. And people who see the other side of it, that there are exploitive structures and systematic suppression built into some of this stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation, and one that we'd be interested in hearing your take on.
Absolutely.
As we go along. So
that we would.
So please comment on anything that occurs to you as we go along here. Okay. Let's see. Our first one is a very good example of the problem of this, right? Because we had to consider whether or not we would even show this and talk about it.
Yeah. Because
we may be getting in trouble with community standards of YouTube just by showing this, because this album cover by Cochise from 1970 is inspired by the surrealists, for instance, Dali landscapes, where what looks like a landscape is actually a human body, and in this case, a female body. Now, the history of art is replete with examples of artists who want to unveil the human form, who want to portray nudity, and censors who want to clothe all the naughty parts, right? And that goes back even to the Vatican, that had metallic fig leaves placed over the strategic bits on their Greek and Roman statues, right? So that's what we have here. We have a female torso, a bust, as a landscape. Powell talks about the difficulties of having the lighting just right. There's an infrared lamp to get the red that the sunset would bring, and all the light has to come from the right angle, and so on and so forth. But what we have here is the female body as landscape.
That's right. In its way, it's compelling, and the notion of landscape, I think, is pretty clear. And the image of the sun, right, and all that. There's something about this that is arresting. There's no question about it. But it is right. It is a bust. It is a female landscape. I'm reminded of the scholar Annette Kolodny's tract from maybe 30, 40 years ago now, Lay of the Land, where she describes how throughout history, landscape has often been defined in kind of female form. And I think you have a clear example of that here. So it is it's a fascinating cover, but it's one that comes, I think, right up to the line. And again, this is the question that enters into this is, what did Cochise want to have happen with this album cover? What kind of impact, what kind of effect did they want to have on the market? Because this would have been in the album rack in a store, right? In a record store alongside scores of other albums. They undoubtedly they knew what they were doing, but it's an interesting choice, I think.
Well, right, and the band probably didn't have a lot to do with this, because this has some really telltale hypnosis things, and
that's right.
Sometimes the band was very, very explicit about what they wanted, but most of the time it was just, you guys make something for us. And This is objectionable, if at all, because of the idea that it objectifies the female form
Right.
and is using sex to sell. So it's a type of exploitation. I'm down on the side. I think it's an attractive album cover. I think it's
Sure.
well done. I'm not offended by that. But again, if your idea is anything that uses sex to sell, anything that objectifies the female body and nudity, we'll say that crosses the line, right?
That's right.
That is
Yeah,
objectionable.
that's right. And again, what we have here is another example of an album from a group that I think, frankly, no one's heard of, and they sort of disappeared. But yet, decades later, we're still talking about the work of Hipgnosis on the cover, right? And so it's the artwork, not necessarily the music, that lives on, oddly enough.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. As is so often the case.
Yeah, for sure.
With Hipgnosis albums. All right. Moving on, we have Thunderbox by Humble Pie from '74. And here we have a keyhole, and we're looking through the keyhole into a bathroom. Someone is on the pot. Looks like a woman, but it's hard to tell. But right in the center, this keyhole, and looking through the keyhole, it's all about voyeurism, right? And the fact that we are looking at this album cover makes us voyeurs. We are put into that position.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I find it a strange choice for subject matter, not particularly tasteful. That's about the extent of my problem with this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we have another example here of what might have seemed a possibility in the 70s. Certainly would not fly in the 21st century. You know, it's interesting too, because Humble Pie was a group of some renown, very popular in England, really kind of got some traction in the United States. Steve Marriott was the leader of Humble Pie, and Peter Frampton played with Humble Pie for a while. So it's not as though this group was coming out of nowhere. I mean, this was a group that was well known, and so I actually think that makes the choice even a bit more curious.
Well, the title Thunderbox, right?
Yeah. Well,
can be a reference to a latrine, something like that.
That's right.
In fact, I'm not sure what else it would be, but so yeah. You know, maybe it's natural for Hipgnosis to go there. Humble Pie worked with Hipgnosis 3 times for their album covers. This was one of them. Mm-hmm. The next group that we're going to look at is UFO. They worked a lot with.
Yes, they
Hipgnosis,
did. Almost exclusively. 11,
yeah, 11 album covers of theirs were with Hipgnosis. And here we have Force It. Now, Force It is interesting for a number of reasons. One of the telltale Hipgnosis trademarks is the fact that everything is in focus. Everything about this is sharp from the front to the back, which is not how we normally see things, right? Of course, we have all sorts of shower hoses, shower heads, and bidet, faucets. Oh, faucets.
Oh,
it's
yeah. I think
that might be the source of the wordplay, right? Anyway,
that's a Hipgnosis kind of trait as well. Sort of wordplay, sometimes a little too on the nose, but kind of a pun in this case, maybe, or something.
The part about this that is objectionable is in the background, of course, we have a couple engaged in sexual activity, and combined with Force It, it seems to imply sexual aggression, if not rape.
Yeah.
That's very problematic. Here, there's not really any indication that that's what's going on. By the way, the models are Genesis P. Orridge and Cosi Fanituti, who are members of Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah.
What do you know about Throbbing Gristle?
Throbbing Gristle is oh, I'm not going to be able to come up with it, but it's a member of, it's a part of the Hipgnosis collective.
Yes, Christopherson, Peter Christopherson.
That's right. Yes.
Was one of the founding members of that. It's an industrial music.
That's right.
And
you know, and this is another Hipgnosis trademark, if you will, is that they oftentimes used friends, colleagues, friends of friends as models. That when you talk about the Hipgnosis world, it's actually pretty small, and so it's So of course, members of Throbbing Gristle were the models. That's what Hipgnosis always did.
They actually built that bathroom set at great expense. So they didn't just go into a bathroom and photograph.
Well,
anyway, pretty much the whole idea that was pretty much Christopherson's baby.
Okay.
You know, photography, the idea, the set, everything. So yeah, so Fawcett kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
You could, yeah.
All right. Next is The Greatest Show on Earth by The Greatest Show on Earth. The Greatest Show on Earth, the band, did a total of 3 album covers with Hipgnosis. And this is not photography. Clearly, it's a painting.
Mm-hmm.
But again, showing the female torso. In fact, Steve, do you have a gatefold?
Well, I don't have the gatefold, but I can. But we can take a look at.
The back cover.
The
right?
back cover. Yeah. So it's reminiscent. I think the drawing itself is reminiscent of Vargas, right? Who would do these pinups in the 40s. To me.
I agree with that. Of course, one of the main differences is that Vargas always showed the whole woman.
That's right. No, you're absolutely right.
The naughty bits, right? Not just
the naughty bits. Yeah.
So,
and it's the back cover. Here we go. Yeah.
So that's one of the problems with this is that really you have a woman's body that's been reduced to just the sexual parts. No head, no personality.
Right.
What's nice about this, I think it's actually a very nice painting, very aesthetic, and kind of gets back to the Mother Nature trope, back to what you were talking about before in terms of the woman as landscape.
Yeah, that's right. No, there's something really quite engaging about it, but on the other hand, it is, it's problematic. It's also The Greatest Show on Earth was an EMI client, and EMI was a notoriously conservative record company. And so, while it's on the Harvest imprint of EMI, it just makes you wonder, the kinds of conversations that went on in the halls. And again, here we go. Greatest Show on Earth. Who's that? But this album, right?
And to be clear about this too, they had album covers that were one way in one country and in some way censored or covered up or presented differently in other countries. And we'll talk about one of those coming up, but that happened a lot. We talked about the Tofat album that had a nude couple replaced with a lamb or its American album cover.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So this stuff is still going on. It's still
for sure. Absolutely.
certainly nudity remains very problematic in many countries, America being one of them, of course.
Yes, that's right.
So objectionable, problematic, however you want to call it.
All right.
Our next one is, I think, problematic for entirely different reasons. It's the album Cunning Stunts by Caravan. And I think that already gives the necessary clue about what's objectionable.
And that is
commenting on this.
Yeah, go ahead. This is a good story.
Powell said that the title was, quote, pretty gross. And he said further, quote, any band who could be quite so insensitive deserved a cover that took your attention away from the title. So the idea was, well, what would be, in fact, a cunning stunt? And here we use the same sort of checkerboard principle that they used to good effect earlier with their Uno cover,
Yes,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Alternative squares are omitted. The eye fills them in and kind of completes the image as if you're seeing through this. You're seeing through the suit. You're seeing through the person to what's beyond. And that, of course, we have mirror reflections that are totally different.
Totally different,
from the person that we're seeing.
And
so the image, the actual image, is quite clever, and probably nothing objectionable about that, depending on how you interpret the reflection in the left mirror.
That's right, but I mean, but it has so many of the hypnosis traits, right? And hypnosis used this mirror effect in many of their albums, right? So you would be you'd be drawn to what's in the mirror, what's going on there, the different kinds of perspectives. So it's in its own way quite a complex image or set of images. Again, as we've talked about several times, hypnosis is doing this. This is in the era before Photoshop, and so this is all pulled off with a certain kind of manual dexterity that's really quite extraordinary. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated and labor intensive. And you almost forget the name of the album, which I guess is what Powell was wanting to have happen. Caravan was a prog band of some note, but yeah, this album is interesting.
The album title is offensive.
Yeah. It's offensive, yeah.
So so there's that. That was a one shot, by the way. They worked with hypnosis once. The next title. See if you can guess. There's an album from 1976. See if you can guess what might be objectionable about this. From Montrose.
Yeah, so Montrose, a power group from California, headed up by Ronnie Montrose. Sammy Hagar, or young Sammy Hagar, was on the lead vocal for Montrose. But yeah, this is the notorious Jump On It LP.
Jump On It. So if the greatest show on earth was objectifying female naughty bits, this is an amplification of that. Exploitive. There's no way around that. Together with the title, this crosses the line for me. I mean, this clearly crosses the line.
It crossed the line in the 70s. I mean, I actually remember this in record stores. I actually remember I had a friend who bought this album, and I know why he bought the album, because he showed it to me in his room. This is like almost forbidden fruit at the time. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, there you go. It definitely crossed the line.
It's interesting too, because there were other times when hypnosis would refuse to go there. There was a Foreigner album that they made showing a guy in bed with a telescope above him, directed at him, right? Somebody was watching, or what was implied was he was being watched through a telescope while he was in bed. And the record album said, no, we're not going to go there. It's too gay. Not at all. Put a woman in bed and we've got no problem with it. But Hipgnosis said, yeah, but we do. So, you know, sometimes they stood on principle and didn't go for that sort of thing, but
then other times
jump on it, I think is really
yes,
almost the height of their tastelessness.
Right. That's right.
All right, the next album is a live album from 1977 called Livestock from Brand X.
Yeah, this is
a case where the title is actually not objectionable in itself, but you combine that with a picture of a woman getting out of a limo in a situation that would normally be a red carpet thing, where she's kind of the candy, eye candy on your arm.
Right. Yeah.
And that's about the height of objectification. And then to suggest that, like cattle, she is a type of livestock. And I don't know how else you would interpret this cover.
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think that's
right. It seems pretty spot on. This
I think spot on. Again, a little too on the nose, but it's so Hipgnosis, right? So you have the automobile with only a portion of it visible. You have the woman, but only a portion of her visible. You have this bucolic scene in the background. I mean, Hipgnosis uses landscape images over and over again. What's a little unusual about this from Hipgnosis perspective is the absence of color. They didn't make very many black and white covers, and so this is unusual in that respect. But there you go.
They did a lot of black and white photography, but usually it was then hand tinted.
Exactly, that's right. That's exactly right.
Right.
So yeah, Brand X.
The next one is the album Deliverance from 1977.
Yeah, this is
by a French band, Space.
Yeah, this is okay. So you've got a number of things working here, and again, Dave, as you've noted, you've got this landscape, this picturesque southwestern American landscape. You've got a limousine with someone.
Canyon Valley, by the way.
Canyon Valley, thank you. Yeah, that's it. This looks like something from a John Ford film, right, in the 30s or 40s. You got the limousine with a person.
They were also doing an Al Stewart shooting at the same time. So
well, okay, and so I wonder.
They were actually being economical for once.
So because this is the Time Passages. This is like landscape that ended up on the Al Stewart Time Passages LP. But yeah, you can talk a little bit about this because there are a number of things happening here, and then they had to make some changes, which we can look at for alterations.
Well, this, for instance, shows the front cover of the German album. In Russia, the album was sold with a big paper strip covering the nudity. But when you took the strip off, the floating woman, was shown with the original pubic hair. So
this was the Russian cover. Yeah.
Complete frontal nudity then. The automobile was photographed in London. The milk on the back cover and the woman in the studio, and of course, as I said, Canyon Valley for the background. But interestingly, the the car and the newspaper were also different depending on what country you were
Yes.
buying it in. So the Russian car is a different one than the German car, for instance.
Wow.
Who knows?
Who knows? Wow. Yeah.
But anyway, if you have an objection with the idea that sex sells, and that you're just putting a naked woman on the cover in order to sell more albums, then you're going to find this objectionable.
Yes. An upside down woman, naked woman with a space
And
helmet.
clearly,
Yeah.
clearly it was censored. So
Sure.
that is not merely a subjective feeling, but it's one that's shared in certain societies across the board.
Collective impulse. Yeah.
You know, one thing about this is it's interesting that the issue of nudity in art and in advertising or whatever, it makes strange bedfellows, right? Because on one hand,
Yes, it does.
you have feminists opposing it because it objectifies women. It's sexploitation, using sex to sell a product. And on the other hand, you have the conservative religious group. And normally these two groups don't want anything to do with each
No,
other, right? But
that's
they
right.
can get together behind this. On the religious right, the idea is, well, all of that is, it's a temptation, right? You're being exposed to impure thoughts by seeing this.
Right. Yeah.
And the farther to the right you go, then you have women having to cover their faces, their heads, and till you get the burqas and whatever. Anyway, so there's that. It's the objections have been around for a long, long time.
That's right.
And from completely different camps. So
For sure.
all
Yeah.
right. So Deliverance, naked woman in a space helmet can be objectionable. Our next album is not objectionable at all for what Hipgnosis did, similar to cunning stunts in that sense. It's actually quite a nice image, a refreshing image surrounding water sports, water activities. But the title, again, from the artist, in this case, Richard Wright from Pink Floyd, is Wet Dream.
Yeah.
So
I believe
nocturnal emissions is not something
right.
that people want to necessarily think about or talk about.
That's right.
Um,
But this is
So-
the images, but the images are compelling, water-based relaxation.
compelling,
Yeah.
interesting, colorful. So what Hipgnosis did with this is certainly not a problem. And it may be the same sort of principle. Well, whoever came up with a title like that deserves to have an image that takes your mind away from the title.
Maybe so. Yeah, I think that's right. The only piece of that may get pushback is that Richard Wright, of course, was the keyboardist for Floyd. They had worked with Floyd for a long time and had relationships with all of the members in some fashion. And this is, I think, this is his first solo LP, which was actually quite well received.
And Hipgnosis did albums for two of his. Did he do more than two solo albums?
He just did a couple. I think he did more than two, but it was just a handful. He passed away.
Okay,
in
well,
2008. But
Hipgnosis did covers for two of his. All right, the next bit is, I think, considerably more offensive. This is the album First Offense from Bunk Dogger. And this was also a one-shot deal.
This is
1978
yeah.
album.
Yeah, so I think it's none too subtle.
None too subtle.
It's yeah, it's just a hard one to wrap your head around a little bit. Again, this is the kind of choices that were made here. It was a different era, and but it seems a ludicrously bad idea. It's just
Well,
really quite,
and the idea came from the band
yeah.
itself.
Well, of course, yeah,
Um,
of course it would, right?
Clearly, Aubrey Powell said, she's not talking about her last fishing trip
That's right.
here. It's very clear. And these are schoolgirls, right? I mean, that's,
Yeah,
I think that makes it clearly objection for me. That definitely crosses the line then. On the back cover, she actually is shown then holding the album cover, or sorry, holding a portrait of the band,
the band. Yeah.
but it doesn't really qualify the effect. And Powell said this was an embarrassment. This is an embarrassment in the Hipgnosis catalog.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's well put. Yes, it is. Yeah.
all right. The next one is Correlations, an album from the group Ashra from 1979. This is also a one shot.
Yeah. So this is
Yeah, go ahead.
well, that is this phallic image. Is she at a water fountain? Well, perhaps. There's something else at work here. The image itself, though, is interesting. And again, Hipgnosis had a thing about water and about throwing water and water in motion. And so this is straight, this is straight Hipgnosis. I mean, they did dozens of these with water in
And
flight.
you could almost just take it at I don't want to say face value, because I think face value here is something different, but you could almost just accept it as
right.
a woman drinking from a water fountain, except that the water fountain is so phallic. And I don't know how you drink from a water fountain, but that's not how that's not
so no one
the
drinks
position my mouth is in when I.
That's right. But it's interesting
so
too,
anyway.
the intensity of the close up, and you can see the pores of the art of the model. It's there's something there that's again compelling, but I mean, there's obviously something else at work that is it's problematic and certainly at the edge or maybe over the edge. Yeah, for sure.
All right, and that, well, our next album is kind of a segue then. From the objectionable portion to the icon portion, because the next album cover is definitely iconic. I think it's one that people recognize, even if this cover was not being sold in your part of the world. Certainly there were alternative covers to this. But this is Love Drive from 1979 by the Scorpions. A big album for them. Now this is
go ahead.
Powell says he doesn't feel like this is objectionable, and in fact he feels like in some ways this kind of brings out the whole idea behind the Me Too movement. So he thinks it's still relevant. He thinks it's relevant in the way that it was meant to be. That we have, I don't know. I never saw it that way, but he says you can tell by the expression on her face that she doesn't appreciate what he's doing. what I find interesting about this is one of the technical aspects. This shows a couple in a limousine, and one of her breasts is exposed from her evening gown, and he is stretching a wad of chewing gum
Yeah.
from her nipple. They actually used chewing gum for this, which I would never have thought you could get
No,
chewing gum to actually do that.
no, it's impossible. But yes,
Right? But apparently that's what he said. And I would have thought, maybe silly putty or something you would get
Right.
anyway. But
Yes.
the point is a different one. Clearly, this is something that people could find objectionable. From
Sure,
sex
yes.
sells, you don't actually see anything here, but it's a strange idea, but strangely compelling. I find
Yeah.
it strangely compelling. It's
Yeah.
and it's certainly an album cover that sticks in your mind once you've seen it.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the, in terms of the Scorpions, it's probably one of their most famous covers. And one of
And
the
on
most
the back cover, you do see something. She's taken off the shoulders of her dress, and she's topless.
Yeah.
And both of the models are laughing. They seem to be having a good time. But again, if you have a problem with women being objectified or using sex to sell product, you can certainly find this objection.
Sure. Yes.
All right. Now moving to the purely iconic, I'd like to go back in time a bit to 1973. This is an album cover that really didn't fit into any of our episodes so far. And to be perfectly honest, it's not really iconic, but it's kind of interesting. And it has an interesting story. So we see the album is The House on the Hill by Audience. It's from 1971.
I'll look at the gatefold here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a gatefold. And on the front cover, we see a woman, femme fatale, with her suitor.
Mhm.
And on the back of the gatefold, we see her previous suitor, or at least the body of her previous suitor, being dragged into the entryway by the butler. And her current suitor looks a bit concerned. It's just a wonderful little story, a little vignette captured in an image. One of the things that makes this interesting is the fact that the woman was Syd Barrett's girlfriend, one of the original members of Pink Floyd.
Mhm.
The suitor was a roommate of Syd Barrett's, and the house was lent. We talked about using friends to have models,
Always.
and
Yes.
in this case, the setting is the parents' house of Aubrey Powell's girlfriend.
Right.
They let him use it.
Yeah.
And the butler is their butler,
Of course. Of
who
course.
agreed to
Yeah.
help out. So
It's,
so there's
again,
that. It's just
yeah.
a neat little story, a neat little
It's-
image,
yeah.
and we wanted to get that in. All right. So next on our list is T-Rex with Electric Warrior. from 1971.
Quite a famous
interesting.
album. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting that when T-Rex came to Hipgnosis, he asked them for essentially the same thing that Nick Mason did, asked them for before they made the Dark Side of the Moon album, which was something classic, like a black magic chocolate box. Now, I've never seen a black magic chocolate box, but that must be such incredible packaging that these two different artists referred to it when they were talking about what they wanted their albums to look like.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, so they have a picture here of T-Rex playing guitar. Airbrushed it with a soft edge around the photo, and they just told the printers this airbrush part that should all be in gold, everything else is in black. And this is a very classic.
That's classic. Yeah, and there's a certain energy obviously that emits from it. T-Rex started as a folk group, actually, Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then electrified roughly at this era with Mark Bolan, of course, on the heading the group. And so this also, I think, adds to that. I mean, there's something. T-Rex became a glam band, right? And there's something. Yes. There's a certain energy here that that they wanted to capture. It's very much a kind of classic, a classic cover. I mean, they got what they wanted here for sure.
Interestingly enough, this was a one-shot. Although T-Rex did come and commissioned another album from Hipgnosis, but it was for the album Tanks. And what Hipgnosis came up with was a field full of little bunny rabbits on sunny day, with Mark Bolan in a tank, just running roughshod over them all.
Yeah.
And he rejected that idea.
Yeah.
So that was the end of their negotiation. Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. The next one is Elegy by The Nice, also an album from 1971. And this is interesting. I'm not sure that I was necessarily familiar with this album cover before. It's not iconic for me like many of the other ones are. But this is an album that Aubrey Powell is particularly proud of. And there's just an incredible story behind it as well. They actually went to the Sahara desert around Marrakesh and took 200 inflatable red balls with them, and they were going to with this in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they noticed they had a couple of hand pumps that they were going to do this with, and it took them 20 minutes to pump up one ball.
Yeah.
So it was clear they were not going to pump up 200 balls in this way. So they took all these balls to a local gas station, and the guy there said, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it." And so they came back the next day, and there were a whole bunch of kids pumping balls. They had 30 balls pumped by the next morning.
Ugh.
So that's what they ended up working with. They took these 30 balls and went out to the desert and placed them. This was just, time was running out. The sun was going down, which is why we have such long shadows here, right?
Right.
So they placed the balls, took the shot. Erased the footmarks between with a broom, and got the shot. And then they had all sorts of trouble getting out of there, trouble with the police, stuff stolen out of cars. It's an incredible story in itself, but
it's
but for him, this is one of their milestones, one of the early milestones.
Absolutely. It's reminiscent of the conceptual artist Christo, right? Who the artist who wrapped the Reichstag and the gates of in Central Park, and
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
it's reminiscent of that. There is something that's very, I don't know, there's something here that's very, very powerful. And you see of course the balls in the distance there. I mean, a dune landscape is just mesmerizing anyway, but this is a great one. And the nice, you know, it was a band of some renown. This is Keith Emerson's band before he joined ELP, but it's a great cover. Great cover.
Okay. Our next one is from Nazareth, from 1975.
We'll look at
Hair of the Dog.
We'll look at the gatefold here. Yeah. Nazareth. This is if you're going to own a Nazareth album, this is probably the one that you have, right? This is Hair of the Dog.
This is definitely the one you need. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And this is Hipgnosis did the art direction here, but the cover is essentially just a painting done by David Fairbrother Rowe, who also did illustrations for Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern.
Wow. Yeah.
So we have kind of a, I don't know, a hellhound here with bat wings. It's very evocative. And I can't help but notice, I don't want to say it's plagiarism, but it definitely takes over a lot of elements from Roger Dean, right?
Absolutely. That's the first thing you think of him, especially on the left-hand side, right? That would be in the back cover, right? The Roger Dean, who did so many covers for Yes.
Yes, especially the back cover. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. But this is
an iconic cover, rightly so. I think it's
sure.
Really, really compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. This was the Nazareth album for sure.
All right, our next one is the AC/DC from 1976. Yeah. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And the idea here is that these are all people who are somehow less than respectable.
Yeah.
We have a gigolo here, I think, leather boy. God knows what the grandmother's doing, con man, whatever. But they're all. I think he took this. The hotel in the background. It's in Los Angeles.
It's Los Angeles, yeah. This is Southern California, yeah. So right, the palm trees and all
says,
that.
You know that all sorts of dirty deeds have been done there.
Sure. Yeah.
The only one who does not have a little black balcony in front of their eyes is the dog. And the dog is also the only one who looks ashamed. He looks like he's ashamed of being associated with these people.
Yeah, there's maybe a hint of shame on his face. A hint, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely iconic. And the only AC/DC album that Hipgnosis did.
My recollection is that the AC/DC wasn't crazy about this album cover, though, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, and that may be the only reason. That might be the reason that it's the only one that.
They didn't particularly care for it.
Nobody was being impaled with a guitar. There were
no electrification,
lightning strikes.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is from John Anderson. Now, John Anderson, of course, was the lead singer of Yes. And Yes, for years, used Roger Dean as the illustrator, the painter for their album covers. And anyone who knew knew that would be excused for thinking that maybe he got Dean to do this cover,
Of course.
but he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was also David Fairbrother Rowe. So David Fairbrother Rowe got a lot of mileage out of Dean-like illustrations. And there are worse people to copy, and he does it well. So another iconic album, and again, it's Hipgnosis doing the art direction, but the artist is David Fairbrother Rowe. Okay, next is Technical Ecstasy.
The one and only Black Sabbath.
The interesting thing about this is that Aubrey Powell tells the story of presenting this album to Black Sabbath, this album cover, right? And this was one of several suggestions that they made. But he tells the story twice. Once in his book, Vinyl Album Cover Art, and once in a Rolling Stone interview.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read what he has here. And Steve, maybe you can tell the version from the Rolling Stone.
I can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Ozzy Osbourne strode back and forth in front of the ideas propped up against the wall, muttering, "Like that, don't like that." There was no conversation, no idle patter, no sales pitch, no explanations that had to be provided. "That's the one," he said suddenly, pointing to the robots and turning to the rest of the room, daring contradiction. 3 minutes tops. Everyone nodded in silent or mumbled agreement. I was delighted, if slightly stunned. Okay, so that's how it happened, right?
That's how it happened. Or it happened, Powell meets with the members of Black Sabbath, at least 3 of the members of Black Sabbath. Sabbath, who are a notoriously loud band, right? They were boisterous. They just, infighting was just constant. And they made a decision on this particular cover, which Powell was happy to see was not somebody, some sort of dark image, somebody was swinging a sword. It was, it was modern. It was futuristic in a way. And so they've come to a decision about the the LP cover when a incredibly drunk Ozzy Osbourne comes stumbling in, loud, boisterous.
Wait, Ozzy Osbourne was drunk?
I know.
That seems so uncharacteristic.
It's incredible, right? I think that in this, he was accompanied by his then girlfriend, Sharon, and makes an enormous scene about the album and about the cover, and basically blurts out that this is the one I want. This is the one I want. And the group then, yep, that's the one we've already picked. And so it's, the stories are slightly dissimilar, but it is the case that Hipgnosis would work with bands who were, quite functional, and also work with bands who were, dysfunctional. And Black Sabbath was notoriously, famously dysfunctional. But they ended up with a very interesting cover. Really interesting cover, I think.
Yeah, I guess there was a meltdown after they said that they had already made a decision without things like that. And,
these stories are different, or at least slightly different, but it's also kind of amazing.
They're at least slightly different, yeah.
Yeah, Black Sabbath accomplished anything, just given the amount of substance abuse and dysfunction within the band. It's really stunning. But Technical Ecstasy is, it is classic Hipgnosis. It is classic Hipgnosis, and gives, I think, a little bit of a breath of fresh air for a Black Sabbath, for the Black Sabbath LP. It's interesting, cute.
Okay. The Hipgnosis did 2 Styx covers, and one of them was Pieces of 8 from 1978.
Yeah.
And they played around with some Easter Island imagery. Here we have an Easter Island head as an earring for these women. I don't know if this is a gatefold, but the back cover anyway shows the members of the band in essentially the same position. So again, it's a subversive portrait. The portrait is not up front, but anybody who was into rock and roll in the 70s is familiar with this album cover.
That's for sure. And it's also very reminiscent of another album cover that Hipgnosis did. It was Eve from Alan Parsons, using female models, very close, intensely close. I mean, too close, right? And the images are almost kind of uncomfortable. And so it's, they're very, very similar. But yeah, Styx sold a lot of albums with this Piece of 8, no question.
Now, the last one that we're going to look at, I'd like to spend just a little bit more time with. This is an album that Aubrey Powell dedicated 4 pages to in his book. And most of the album covers in his book were 3 to a page and not even commented. But this one he talked about quite a bit. And he gives all the credit to Storm Thorgerson for this, because as we'll see, Thorgerson essentially wrote a text, and they're very proud of coming up with non-album covers. The first time I think they applied that idea was with Adam Hart Mother, but in a way, this is also a non-album cover because it doesn't use a lot of the elements that you expect from an album cover, but it's also a hyper album cover because it has all the elements on a meta level that you just. Yeah, every one of the elements is then listed, described. It's kind of like Magritte in reverse, where you say this is something that it basically isn't. This is an album cover. Well, is it really? Interesting thing about this is that this was a cover that he had come up with on his own. Storm had come up with on his own. And the XTC came in and was looking at covers that they had prepared for the band for this album, Go To. And they didn't really care for any of them. But then they saw this, well, there were several versions of this album, different colors, just laying on the floor of the studio. They said, well, what's this? This looks interesting. Actually, this is exactly what we want. So
yeah,
they didn't take any of the album covers that had been prepared for them, but they had enough stuff lying around that you could maybe find something on your own, and what I'd like to do right now is just talk about a fan. This is something that the artist and designer, a friend of the group of Hipgnosis looked at. They worked with him later. Sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'd like to read what he has to say because it's quite an interesting comment about this. I was into the music of XTC at the time, but if I'm honest, I would have bought the Go To album even if they were rubbish because of the way it looked. I had never seen anything like it. It was shocking and it made me smile, and it sat uncomfortably in my record collection. I would position it at the front of my records so myself or my friends would stumble across it when they came into my bedroom. I still play that game today. The go-to art made me realize that things could be different. It didn't have to be the mediocrity I was fearful of. It was a wake-up call. It was possible to escape. If you look at this album cover, as I've done quite a lot, you'll come to understand that it was wonderfully, beautifully ridiculous. It brutally strips away with a knowing perversity any of the ingredients that an album cover should have. It gives you nothing but intellect. No band logo, no color photography, no clues, nothing. Nothing. It doesn't want to be liked. It's a bastard of a cover and it knows it. It sits there on the shelf giving you the eye or the occasional vinyl finger. It loves to sit next to the self-titled Boston as it enjoys the friction. Time hasn't diluted its attitude. In fact, it's probably worse now that it has more to revolt against. I love it.
Yeah.
So
This is it.
This is it. And it is subversive, and it's
no question. That's right.
So deceptively simple, but also iconic.
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
you have Aubrey Powell complaining about Sex Pistols album covers that just pretty much ruined it for everybody else, because if you can produce an album cover for 10 quid, why is anybody going to go and spend 50,000?
That's right.
But this was kind of a seed for that sort of thing, don't you think?
Oh, I think it's absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely
Just very
that vein. Yeah,
very basic, very simplistic,
but
and very punk in its attitude.
Very punk, very acerbic. It challenges authority and challenges convention, and spins it on the audience. And it's one of the great album covers of all time. And it's surprising that no one else had tried this. In a way, because it's deceptively simple.
Anyway,
I mean, the notion of that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And with that note, I guess we'll end this episode, and with it, our little mini series on Hipgnosis.
That's right. So I just want to say real quickly that please check us out on Twitter, Stephen Daves 1 Twitter. We tweet every day and it's interesting stuff. And Dave, you've got some final thoughts here as we wrap up today's episode.
Sure. If you enjoyed what you watched today, and we hope you did, you can watch more of our videos by subscribing right here. There's an earlier episode of the Hipgnosis right here. So you can find out more about their iconic album covers. And here's the playlist for today's episode right here, where we include a lot of the music from the albums that we've talked about. And please feel free to comment below. We always love to hear what you think.
Yeah, we do.
Especially what you might have to think about what makes album covers or anything else objectionable.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So until next time.
Yeah. Thanks. See you later. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.